This hearing of the Subcommittee on General Farm Commodities and Risk Management, entitled A Hearing to Review Efficacy of the Farm Safety Net, will come to order. Welcome and thank you for joining today's hearing. After brief opening remarks, members will receive testimony from our witnesses today, and then the hearing will be open to questions. Members will be recognized in order of seniority, alternating between majority and minority members, and in the order of arrival for those members who have joined us after the hearing was called to order. When you are recognized, you will be asked to unmute your microphone and will have 5 minutes to ask your question or make a comment. If you are not speaking, I ask that you remain muted in order to minimize background noise. In order to get to as many questions as possible, the timer will stay consistently visible on your screen. In consultation with the ranking member and pursuant to Rule 11E, I want to make members of the subcommittee aware that other members of the full committee may join us today. Thank you to all of our witnesses and my colleagues for joining us here today. I'm excited to chair this subcommittee, this Congress, and to work with my colleagues to dive into how weather and economic conditions impact our farmers and how safety net programs are functioning to help them through tough times. We've heard time and again how critical crop insurance is as a risk management tool for farmers and how necessary Title I farm programs are to address market and production challenges. We have a great panel of witnesses here today, including several farmers who will talk about production and weather conditions in recent years, a crop insurance agent who will give an overview of how the program works, and an ag economist who will give us insight on the state of the farm economy and considerations for the safety net. This is an important hearing to get input from you about how the 2018 Farm Bill programs are working and to get a better understanding of what is happening in the countryside. We are interested to hear more about the considerations given in signing up for ARC or PLC and how changes we made to those programs have worked for growers. And in particular, we want to hear about how crop insurance has kicked in times of need. Building up to this hearing, we've held a series of meetings with stakeholders and have led roundtables with this subcommittee to hear members' priorities as well as to get input from national farm organizations. In addition to hearing from this panel today, we intend to hold additional hearings to help inform this subcommittee on the impacts of the dire drought conditions affecting much of the West, the Upper Great Plains, and the Midwest, as well as to understand how other severe weather events this year have affected farmers. The information we gather from you today and in future hearings is critically important in our work to ensure that help is here when times are tough and when disasters strike. I'd now like to welcome the distinguished ranking member, the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Austin Scott, for any opening remarks he would like to give.
Thank you, Chairwoman Bustos. This is an extremely important hearing to evaluate the importance of the farm safety net programs. Okay.
We are going to take a brief recess. We have some technical issues, and we will resume as soon as we get those taken care of.
No members on. How long?
This is an audio check from 1300, audio check from the room to the platform. Test 1, 2, check 1, 2. This is an audio check from 1300. This is a room audio check to the platform. Testing 1, 2, test 1, 2.
Audio check received.
All right, we'll come back to order. At this point, I'd like to welcome the distinguished ranking member, the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Austin Scott, for any opening remarks he would like to give.
Yeah, thank you, Chairwoman Bustos. I'll try to move pretty quick so we can get back on time after the technical difficulties. This is an extremely important hearing to talk about the farm safety nets from the last Farm Bill and changes that can be made as we work into the new Farm Bill. Certainly in my state, the state of Georgia, after Hurricane Michael, we saw the shortcomings of the crop insurance program. We have heard a lot about the NAP programs, the non-insurable crop assistance program, and changes that, that can be made there, and look forward to hearing the testimony from the farmers on the ground about their recommendations and how we create a better safety net for our producers that are important to the food supply of all Americans. A couple of things that I would like to mention. Maintaining a stable and reliable safety net for these farmers in the event of natural disasters or in the event of a crippled economy or collapsing commodity prices need to be addressed in the Farm Bill. The other issue, Communist China. In the last decade alone, the Chinese government has wreaked havoc on markets for cotton, sorghum, rice, wheat, corn, and of course soybeans. Their action in the markets this past week are indicative of who they are as a bad trade partner. I also have significant concerns about the Chinese ownership of the input and suppliers of our food processing, and look forward to hearing from the producers on the ground about how, as we push forward into the next Farm Bill, we use not only the USDA but the Commodity Futures Trading Commission to protect our producers from unfair practices of foreign adversaries. With that, I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. The chair would request that other members submit their opening statements for the record so witnesses may begin their testimony and to ensure that there is ample time for questions. I'm pleased to welcome such a distinguished panel of witnesses to our hearing today. Our witnesses bring to our hearing a wide range of experience and expertise, and I thank them for joining. Our first witness today is Mr. Jeff Kerwin. Jeff is a leading-edge corn and soybean farmer from the congressional district that I serve in West Central Illinois. I've known him for several years, and I've appreciated the input he's provided me in serving on the Farm Profitability Task Force on my Ag Advisory Committee. He is a forward thinker in his use of new technology and his business management skills to enhance farm productivity. We appreciate your willingness, Jeff, to appear before us today, and we look forward to your testimony. To introduce our second witness, I'm pleased to yield to our colleague on the subcommittee, the distinguished gentleman from California, Representative Salud Carbajal.
Thank you, Chairwoman Bustos. It is an honor for me to welcome a constituent of mine from the Central Coast of California to testify before our subcommittee today. Brian Talley is the CEO of Talley Farms and Talley Vineyards in my district. He is a third-generation farmer and second-generation wine grower who was born and raised in Arroyo Grande, California, and began his career in the family business, harvesting vegetables when he was 12 years old. Brian went on to earn degrees from UC Berkeley in history and natural resource economics. Brian's family farming operation produces more than 20 different specialty crop commodities, including vegetables, citrus, avocados, and wine grapes. In addition to managing his farming operation, Brian also serves as director of Farm Credit West. I look forward to Brian's testimony at our committee today and encourage all my colleagues to try his excellent wines when you have a chance. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carbajal. To introduce our next witness today, I'm pleased to yield to the ranking member, the distinguished gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Chairwoman Bustos. It's my pleasure to introduce my friend and constituent, Wes Shannon. He and his wife, Rhonda, have been farming with their family in Tift County, Georgia for 44 years. They have survived the 80s, the floods, the droughts, the hurricanes, and everything else since then. They know a tremendous amount and will be able to provide a tremendous amount of insight to the challenges that our farmers face, including transitioning the farm to the next generation. He's a great American, a great farmer, a great friend, and so it's my pleasure to introduce the committee to Mr. Wes Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. To introduce our fourth witness, I'm pleased to yield to our distinguished colleague on the subcommittee, the gentlewoman from Minnesota, Ms. Craig.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Bustos and the ranking member. I am so pleased to be able to introduce to the subcommittee today Mr. Rob Tate. Mr. Tate is a farmer and crop insurance agent from just outside of Cannon Falls, a great town in southeastern Minnesota. Mr. Tate has worked as a crop insurance agent and crop revenue consultant in Cannon Falls for the past 16 years. He's also a farmer growing corn and soybeans in his fifth-generation family farm. Mr. Tate's comprehensive ag background gives him unique and comprehensive insight into issues facing our farmers today, especially when it comes to the importance of crop insurance and a strong farm safety net. In addition to farming, working as a crop insurance agent and advising farmers in his community, he also serves on the board of the Minnesota Corn Growers Association and on various civic boards in our community. Mr. Tate and his wife Kelly have 2 sons. Thank you, Mr. Tate, for your work in Southeast Minnesota, for taking the time to share your thoughts with us today, taking the time to share your thoughts with me on what we should be doing here in Congress. And with that, Chairwoman Bustos, thank you again for inviting Mr. Tate to testify before the subcommittee today, and I yield back.
Thank you, Congresswoman Craig. Our fifth and final witness is Dr. Gary Schnitke. I'm honored that we will be able to hear from Dr. Schnitke today. He is well-renowned in the farm policy world for his analysis and his insights. He is a professor in the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Economics at the University of Illinois. Much of his work is focused on analyzing the profitability of farms and helping farmers to mitigate risk. He has developed tools to help farmers select commodity programs and crop insurance options, and he writes the weekly Farm Economics article, which appears every week on the Farm Doc Daily website. Dr. Schnitke, thank you for agreeing to join us today and to share your insights. So welcome to all of our witnesses. We will now proceed to hearing your testimony. You will each have 5 minutes. The timer should be visible to you on your screen and will count down to 0, at which point your time has expired. We will start with Jeff Kerwin. Mr. Kerwin, please begin when you are ready.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Madam Chair Bustos, Ranking Member Scott, and everyone on the committee. I'm Jeff Kerwin, a corn and soybean farmer from New Windsor, Illinois. That's about 20 miles south of the Quad Cities and about 25 miles east of the Mississippi River. I can tell you that the last 3 years have posed a series of major challenges for me, my neighbors, and for farmers across the country. Many of us are still working through those challenges and trying to process what they mean for our industry. In 2018, the previous administration launched a trade war with China, causing prices of soybeans to fall dramatically before they rebounded. In 2019, we witnessed heavy rains and flooding across much of Illinois and the Midwest, causing planting delays, late harvests, grain quality, and storage issues. Then came 2020, a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic that disrupted the ag supply chains across the country in a way that we've never witnessed. COVID wreaked economic havoc on our industry. Add to that a derecho that caused $4 billion in damages to Iowa farms and millions of dollars worth of damage on our side of the river. Never in recent memory, nor in my farming career, has agriculture become so reliant for such an extended period on emergency assistance. While we might not always express it, farmers greatly appreciate the efforts that Congress and the USDA over the past 3 years have done to address the magnitude and cumulative impact caused by each of these natural and economic disasters. Crop insurance is a cornerstone of my operation. Our ability to market our grain, manage our risks, and financially survive depends on crop insurance. Hundreds of thousands of dollars are invested in a growing crop that can be wiped out in one weather event. And there are broader impacts on the ag economy. Considering what farmers spend on ag inputs, machinery, equipment, and crop protection, we must be successful for everyone else. That's why crop insurance is so critical for our entire industry. On top of crop insurance, looking at the recent past, whether it was CFAP, WIP Plus, or market facilitation program payments, the timely emergency assistance that you and the USDA provided allowed farmers like me to meet the challenges, pay our bills, and continue to produce. Through it all, the Farm Safety Net, our PLC, also played a key role in keeping farmers afloat. But in the absence of ad hoc disaster assistance, there's no question those programs and the timing of payments were simply not designed to address extraordinary economic and weather-related disasters. There needs to be a review of these programs, and farm organizations need to be part of that conversation. In the big picture, the last 3 years have demonstrated that the Farm Safety Net, farm programs, and crop insurance performed well. But the recent past has also clearly revealed that the size of the Commodity Credit Corporation has neither kept up with inflation nor the potential for more frequent natural disasters on major production disruptions. As we move forward as an industry, that's something that we must be taken into account. Illinois farmers have been talking about the potential for participating in voluntary carbon markets. We're considering what types of government programs exist and what could develop to incentivize soil carbon and reward producers with a demonstrated track record of soil health practices that sequester carbon. That policy discussion has also highlighted what many farmers consider to be a shortage of NRCS technical assistance. Finally, USDA's recent announcement creating a pandemic cover crop program is welcomed by my fellow Illinois producers, many of whom have taken advantage of our $5 per acre crop insurance discount offered the last 2 years by the Illinois Department of Ag. I'd like to thank the chair, the ranking member, and committee for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kerwin. Mr. Talley, please begin when you're ready.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today. I had participated in the federal crop insurance program for more than 20 years for lemons, avocados, and wine grapes at the catastrophic level, which means that we must suffer a loss of more than half of our crop for a claim to pay off. And during our history in the program, we have experienced losses and had claims paid in all 3 of our insured commodities. Some of these losses have been associated with catastrophic events like the historic freeze of 2007 that infected the entire state of California and resulted in significant frost damage and losses in my lemon orchard. More than half of my crop either fell on the ground or was sent to be juiced with almost no return. Other times, these have been more subtle events, such as in 2017, when El Nino conditions resulted in poor pollination and production of less than half of my normal avocado crop in 2018. In each of these instances, I've been pleased with the service that I've received to get my claims paid in a timely manner. And I consider the role of independent crop insurance agents who provide the service in terms of collection of premiums and payment of claims to be one of the strengths of the crop insurance program. And I hope that there will always be a role for independent insurance agents in the program. Moving forward to more recent events, I'd like to talk a little bit about 2020, when much of the West Coast was impacted by devastating wildfires. I'm blessed that the crops that I grow were largely unaffected because we had no major wildfires in San Luis Obispo County. And though the smoke was nearly unbearable for days on end, we did not experience any smoke taint in our wines. Other wine growers were not so fortunate, and many will be faced with a total loss of the 2020 vintage or a difficult choice between selling a damaged product with their name on it, selling off inventory in bulk at a loss, or simply dumping it down the drain. A leading expert in the California wine industry, John Moramarco, has estimated that losses will reach $3.7 billion due to the wildfires of 2020, and that impacts will be felt into the year 2023. Everyone I talk to in the wine industry assumes that this will be an ongoing challenge. Scientists and consulting winemakers are extremely focused on establishing new protocols to treat smoke-tainted wine. But having dealt with smoke-tainted grapes in 2015 due to a local wildfire and comparing notes with colleagues recently, I can assure you that the technology does not exist to truly fix smoke-tainted wine. On a somewhat related note, I would like to share with you that just a few weeks ago, we learned that Nationwide Insurance, who handles the liability insurance for our companies, made the decision to exit the California market in many agricultural sectors. As I understand it, this decision was largely driven by losses due to wildfires over the past 3 years. And I recognize that this is not within the purview of this committee, but wanted to make you aware of the challenges that farmers in California face as we move forward. And while I'm not going to dwell on the issues associated with current drought conditions, which are extreme, I will tell you that the lack of rainfall and insufficient groundwater are just adding to the challenges that we face here in California. In closing, I want to emphasize that I view the federal crop insurance program to be a fundamental element of the safety net that secures the survival of domestic food production, which I consider to be of critical national importance for all Americans. I hope that any changes contemplated to the federal crop insurance program only serve to strengthen it. Thank you very much for taking my testimony today.
Thank you, Mr. Talley. Mr. Shannon, please begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Congressman Scott, for that introduction. Madam Chair, Congressman Bishop, and other committee members, thank you all for the opportunity to be with you today. I'm Wes Shannon, a farmer from Tift County, Georgia, part of Georgia's 8th congressional district. My grandfather was a farmer, my father was a farmer, and agricultural researcher with the University of Georgia. Throughout my years in the agriculture industry, I have been active with several groups that advocate for farmers, including Georgia Peanut Commission, National Peanut Board, Georgia Farm Bureau, National Cotton Council. I've also been involved with a peanut buying point and a cotton gin. I began working as a farmer on the farm before I even graduated high school. Our farm grew peanuts, corn, soybeans, hogs, and cattle. It was in those early days on the farm that I realized the importance of a strong farm safety net. My first experience with crop failure was in 1977, when our corn crop was negatively impacted by a drought and aflatoxin. 3 years later, in 1980, I took out an operating loan from a local bank, planted my first peanut crop. Drought and insects caused the crop to fail. At the end of that first crop year, I had a negative net worth. My wife and I were married in 1981. We bought our first farm in 1985. In 1990, we purchased an adjoining farm that we had been renting. We lived frugally, with the plan to pay those mortgages off as soon as possible, because we'd seen what debt had done to so many farmers during those tough times. We were set to have our farms paid for by the time we were 40 years old, and then came the drought decade of the 90s. It seemed as if every year was dry, except for 1994, when a tropical storm flooded Albany, Georgia, 40 miles west. A storm in October of that year, right around peanut harvest time, made the field so wet, harvest was almost impossible. We were able to pay off both farms, but our carryover debt by the time was quite large. And another drought short crop in 2000, we had to refinance both our farms. We were basically starting over again, having to buy the same farms for the second time due to natural disasters. We worked through the first decade of this century as carefully as we could while trying to raise a son and daughter, pay for our farms all over again. Our farms produced pretty well, but there was never anything extra left over. I'm now in my early 60s, and despite the assistance we have received from safety net programs, I've had to refinance our two farms for the third time. Our dream of having our farms paid for continues to evade us. Our stress and anxiety levels remain high. I wish I could tell you that our experience is an isolated case, but it is not. Many farmers across the South could share similar stories. My family's story and the stories of our fellow farmers in the area are exactly why we need a very strong safety net. Crop insurance is a vital tool for farmers, and Congress must not do anything to undermine it. I do believe the crop insurance program could be improved. I would like to see a crop insurance program that better covers our cost of production. If we are making a 10% profit with a good crop, that's one thing, but if we are insured at a 75% level, we must lose 25% before we can even collect indemnities. We simply do not have that kind of profit margin. Title I programs are another very important tool for farmers. For me, the peanut and seed cotton programs are a must. These programs should be continued at a level that will allow me to service my farm debts during tough times. Increasing reference prices or a percentage of base acres on which farmers can collect would be ideal. Congress should also maintain the separate payment limit for peanut program. Peanuts are a unique, cost-intensive crop which require equipment that cannot be used for any other purpose on our farm. I've heard that Chairman David Scott would like to establish a permanent disaster program. I believe this is an idea of a lot of farmers in our state could get behind. Though a new program couldn't come at the expense of existing safety net, having a standing program in place would remove the political challenges associated with ad hoc disaster bills and hopefully get assistance to where it is needed in a more timely manner. Family farms have always been and hopefully will continue to be the backbone of rural economies in this country. It is our job as farmers to provide food, fiber, and shelter to the American people and others across the world. I urge you all to do everything in your power to help farmers continue the important work we do. Thank you again, Mr. Scott, for the invitation and introduction. Madam Chair and committee members, thank you all for the time and attention today. I would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shannon. Mr. Tate, please begin when you're ready.
Chairwoman Bustos, Ranking Member Scott, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for holding this hearing today. My name is Rob Tate. I'm a farmer, crop insurance agent, and crop revenue consultant, which means I work with fellow farmers to help them develop comprehensive risk management strategies for their farms. I'm also a board member of the Minnesota Corn Growers Association. My wife, Kelly, is a healthcare worker providing palliative care, and we raised two boys, Logan and Jonathan, just outside of Cannon Falls, Minnesota, where we're represented by Angie Craig, who I know had something to do with my invitation to testify today. Thank you, Congresswoman. I grew up in Farmington, a Twin Cities suburb, but now I live in Cannon Falls on the family farm that my ancestors homesteaded generations ago. We love living and working on our fifth generation family farm. And as a crop revenue consultant, I look at the whole financial picture of farmers. I help with, and today I want to mainly focus on crop insurance. A strong farm bill safety net and an ad hoc relief that you provided over the past several years have been vital to the survival of farm families. MFP, CFAP, WIP Plus, and the pandemic assistance for producers have not been perfect, but I would not want to imagine what farm country would look like without them. American agriculture has been in an economic ditch for about 7 years before we started to reemerge earlier this year. Thanks to the rising global demand and higher commodity prices, it's a relief. The overreaching theme in my testimony this afternoon is the federal crop insurance is an absolute mainstay for the rural Minnesota and farm families like mine. If Washington does anything on farm policy, it should first do no harm to crop insurance. Secondly, for producers in regions and crops where the program is not working optimally, I'd urge Congress and USDA to work with producers to address these situations through the 508H process, research and development and pilot programs, which are all authorized under the statute. Farming is a very risky business, and the stakes keep getting higher and higher. Crop insurance is not only vital to producers in recovering from natural disasters, but it's also essential in securing credit. The best way to help beginning farmers, socially disadvantaged farmers, or other producers who, like me in my early years, may not have had a lot of capital at their disposal is to help these producers manage their risk through federal crop insurance. We mainly grow corn and soybeans in my area, though we've had a good crop mix in Minnesota, dairy and livestock as well. For years, livestock and dairy were underserved by crop insurance, but now roughly 35% of the milk marketed in the United States is insured under crop insurance. Over 700,000 head of cattle are insured under the LRP or livestock risk protection. These two great precedents about what can be done for underserved producers using policy development authorities under crop insurance. The innovations that built the successful crop insurance program began in 1980 when Congress turned the sales and servicing of insurance over to the private sector. Now an indemnity is usually received within 30 days of a finalized claim. This is incredibly efficient, especially when compared to disaster programs where it can take years. In 1994 and 2000, Congress increased the premium discount for farmers to encourage producer participation in crop insurance at higher coverage levels. These innovations achieved great success and largely eliminated the need for ad hoc disaster until the first WIP program in 2017. And finally, another innovation is Dr. Art Barnaby's development of the revenue coverage products. These innovations have caused federal crop insurance to take off over the last 41 years. Importantly, there are more premiums paid into the system than indemnities paid out. Farmers have skin in the game. One area where there's room for improvement is on deductibles. A farmer has a deductible on the face of his policy. If he has a 75% coverage, he has to lose 25% of his crop before he can collect indemnity beyond that. The other is a hidden deductible when the APH, the amount that he can insure based upon past yields, lags behind what they can actually produce. Trend-adjusted yields, yield exclusions are examples where Congress, RMA, private sector development have worked hard to tackle a problem, but there's still room for improvement. As we continue to work on improving crop insurance, I appreciate Chairman Scott's interest in standing disaster program as a potential bridge that complements rather than undermines crop insurance. That does not result in lower crop insurance participation or coverage levels. Finally, I hope to steer you away from a couple of things as policymakers. There have been proposals in the past that would undo every success of crop insurance and return it to the days when it did not work for farmers. Cutting premium discounts, eliminating the harvest price option, private sector delivery, undermining producer confidentiality, and imposing pay limits and AGI testing are proposals that would be extremely harmful. Thank you, and I hope my testimony has been helpful, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Dr. Schnitke, our final witness for today, please begin when you're ready.
Chairman Bustos and members of this subcommittee, I thank you for the opportunity to address you today. I am a professor in farm management and work with farmers in Illinois and the Midwest as they make their farm management and risk management decisions. As has been mentioned a number of times, the last 5 years have been tumultuous in agriculture with many detrimental impacts. The trade disputes in 2018 caused commodity prices to fall. Weather and agricultural disasters occurred, including hurricanes, wildfires, and wet weather. In the Midwest, heavy rainfall in the latter half of 2018 through 2019 caused flooding and widespread delays in preventive planning. In 2020, the coronavirus and its attendant controls measures led to severe supply chain issues, particularly for livestock and dairy producers. According to the ERS, the net farm income in the United States fell from a high of $140 billion in 2012 to an average of $74 billion from 2016 to 2019. Incomes projected are rebounded to a forecast of $123 billion in 2020, but the trade disputes, weather issues, along with high yields contributed to abundant supply led to these lower incomes. Without the federal safety net, farm incomes would have been much lower. Payments from farm safety net programs and net insurance payments were 20% of the net income in 2018, 33% in 2019, and 59% in 2020. Traditional farm safety net programs, and that would include the commodity title and crop insurance programs, did provide support from 2018 to 2020. However, a great deal of the support came from three additional sources. First were congressionally passed disaster legislation leading to the WIP and WIP Plus programs. The administration instituted market facilitation program payments to counter adverse impacts of trade disputes and the CFAT program to counter COVID-19 control measures. Finally, the Small Business Administration programs, including the Payment Protection Program and EIDL programs, provided support. One hopes that the worst of the trade disputes and COVID control measures are behind us, but there is no guarantee of that. Still, the justification for the MFP and CFAT programs may have exposed weaknesses to the existing commodity title programs. Many commodities, including corn and soybeans, had low prices in recent years, including 2018 and 2019. For example, market year average prices for soybeans were $8.48 per bushel in 2018 and $8.57 in 2019, their lowest levels since 2006. In both 2018 and 2019, those soybean prices did not trigger PLC payments, and ARC payments were at a relatively modest level of $563 million for soybeans in 2019. WIP Plus provided relief for many producers and included additional payments for crops protected by federally regulated crop insurance programs and national non-insured disaster assistance. In addition, prevent plant payments in 2019 were increased either 15 or 10%. Those additional payments were helped offset the support or made prevent plant more equal to the support provided by the MFP payments for planted crops. These program payments perhaps signal needed changes to strengthen existing crop insurance programs such that additional ad hoc programs are less needed in the future. Revisiting payment rating issues made in the process as well. From 2015 to 2018, the loss ratio on all federal products averaged 0.67, well below target ratios. Corn and soybeans had lower ratios, respectively at 0.52 and 0.53. Many commodities have had higher prices since late summer 2020, and income looked better in 2021. This more robust output differs from what many, myself included, would have not expected last year at this time. And that just illustrates how situations can change abruptly in agriculture. The committee's evaluation of the efficacy of the programs is timely, as the safety net will continue to come into play into the future.
Thank you, Dr. Schnitke. At this time, members will be recognized for questions in order of seniority, alternating between majority and minority members. You will be recognized for 5 minutes each in order to allow us to get to as many questions as possible. Please keep your microphones muted until you are recognized in order to minimize background noise. I will recognize myself for 5 minutes. And just so our witnesses know, we have been called for votes over on the House floor, so I will be going in and out of the chair here, and Mr. Carbajal will be filling in for me. Mr. Scott went over to vote. He will be back. So just want to make sure that our witnesses knew that. I'm going to start out by saying thank you very much to all of you for your testimony. It's obviously clear that we have a lot of agricultural production represented here and different impacts and challenges that you've faced in the recent years. I very much appreciate the perspective that all of our witnesses have provided for us today and look forward to discussing several issues with you. I'm going to start out with my line of questioning to Dr. Schnitke. The drought obviously has absolutely ravaged the West Coast, in the Upper Plains, and now we're starting to see it creep into the Midwest. In my congressional district, the upper 4 counties in my congressional district are beginning to see that impact. I'm wondering, Dr. Schnitke, what are the measurable economic impacts that we've seen so far, and what do you see going forward?
Yeah, so and again, there is a widespread drought in the western part of the country, and again, we will see those areas suffer from a yield standpoint, and we could again see that particularly now in Iowa and hopefully in western Illinois. Hopefully, that will break in the future, but one never knows that. You know, the yield, the attendant yield losses associated with those situations can result in harm to those operations, and crop insurance will aid in covering those losses, if particularly for commodity type agriculture.
So what does the participation in crop insurance look like in the West Coast and the Upper Plains, and how does that compare to the Midwest?
You know, I don't have specific knowledge of what the West Coast participation would look like. In the Midwest, corn and soybeans is federally insured right at the 90% mark. My understanding is that it would be less than that in the western part of the country.
Can you talk a little bit, Dr. Schnitke, about how the University of Illinois Farm Program Decision Tool was developed and what sort of factors are incorporated into the recommendations that are made to farmers?
Yeah, our tools work across the United States and were developed with the aid of funding from the federal Office of Chief Economist several farm bills ago now. But what we do is make projections of prices and at the point of time at which farmers have to make those decisions, and provide farmers a comparison between PLC and Ark County for the particular crops in every county in the United States. The farmers, again, you know, obviously projections are what they are, and are made at a time when you don't know what prices or yields will be. For example, we made projections from March, but prior to the March 15th deadline for the current sign-up year. We find, or many of the farmers find those useful not only from giving an expectation of payments for the coming marketing year, but also for looking at how those items will impact risk. And obviously that varies over time as prices change and Ark County benchmark prices change as well as we move through time.
All right, thank you, Dr. Schnitke. I'm going to switch over to Jeff Kerwin. Jeff, again, thank you very much for taking the time to be one of our witnesses today. Wanted to ask you how the risk management tools like crop insurance have worked for you. And the reason I'm asking, Jeff, is that as this subcommittee conducts oversight of the 2018 Farm Bill implementation, and we're also looking to lay the groundwork for the 2023 Farm Bill, how can we make the tools work better?
You know, so they're very successful now. I look back at my farming career and the importance of crop insurance as I was a young, undercapitalized farmer, and it allowed me to access to credit. It solidified, you know, allowed me to market my products maybe before, well, we had an opportunity to do that at a profitable level. So you know, if anything, it's to keep where we're at and build on it. And I would say anything that we can do to increase the amount of coverage, whether that's top-up type programs or the additions to get into those higher percentages of an insured crop or insuring the crop, would be a real benefit.
All right, thank you very much again, Jeff. I really appreciate you being here. I am out of time, so at this point I will yield to Mr. Rouser, the gentleman from North Carolina, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the panelists for being with us today. Although I wish we were all here in person. I'm still trying to get used to all this Zoom, but hopefully here in the near future things will be back to normal in Congress. Southeastern North Carolina, and this is true all across the country, you have disasters. In southeastern North Carolina, we get hit with hurricanes, early freezes, too much rainfall just due to a regular thunderstorm that ends up flooding my district. There's obviously disasters of all types that happen all over the country. This question is for the entire panel, basically, or whoever wishes to chime in. But I'd like to know what you think has worked well with the ad hoc disaster programs that have been put in place. And granted, oftentimes they come late in the game. There will be a disaster, and it takes Congress a while to figure out exactly how we want to handle it. But those times when we have put ad hoc disaster programs in place, whether it's related to the pandemic or disaster or directly disaster related, I'd be curious what you think has worked well and what you think has really been a real obstacle that Congress just never seems to get right. I'll just throw that open for anyone and everyone that wants to weigh in.
I would weigh in that all of the MMP, the CFAP program, and the WIP Plus program did provide needed support during these last 3 years when things were up in the air. It's often difficult for farmers and to make and economists to provide information to farmers to make decisions as those are formulated. And one of those key times was during the 2019 prevent plant decisions. But the difficulty in making decisions when you don't know what the programs are is always something to consider, and having knowing what the policy is always, in my opinion, a good thing.
Anybody else have an opinion?
The MFP money moved pretty fast, and that was one thing we appreciated about that. If we qualified for it, we got it. It came in a hurry. The WHIP money, maybe not so much, and we might qualify for some money and then get factored down. And then the timeliness of it coming. Many farmers had already made some other arrangements before that WHIP money got to us. But thank y'all for everything you've done for us.
If I could, and I don't have as much experience with crop insurance, I think, as some of my fellow farmers on the panel, but I'm a big advocate for involving the private sector. As I said in my comments, I think independent insurance agents play a vital role. And, for us, PPP was a huge benefit, and being able to deal, directly with the bank or, banks to secure that support was critical. So the private sector plays an important role.
So I would chime in that a little bit to what Dr. Schnitke had said, that I can tell you that in 19, I was in an area that was severely affected by the flooding and drought, or the flooding and prevent plant. And those were very tough decisions to make, not knowing, and really crop insurance isn't bound until you plant the crop. So not having the crop planted and facing deadlines and trying to make decisions with that. So certainty definitely is important, and the faster and easier that you can make it and helping us through those decisions. And I sure can't complain through the implementation of some of the other programs, but that is a stressful time in a farm when you have situations like that.
I'd have to agree with the other panelists here. Obviously, crop insurance serves very well in many of these cases, but these extra programs have been extremely beneficial. Me personally, on my farm, I applied for a WIP payment, and it took a long time to get that WIP payment. And in fact, it was on my 18 crop, and I didn't get it paid until, just recently. So there's a long time in that lag time in there, I guess, would be my only complaint.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My time has expired.
Thank you. Ms. Craig, are you here yet? I know you went to go vote. Not hearing from Ms. Craig, I will recognize myself. Mr. Talley, my questions will be directed to you. Over the past decade, California has become more prone to weather extremes, and the Central Coast is no exception. Our community has felt the climate crisis in a multitude of ways: more severe droughts, increasing frequency of heat waves, and record-setting wildfires. Unfortunately, we're likely to see and are already seeing another active year-round wildfire season and extreme drought conditions. Mr. Talley, could you talk about current drought conditions, how they are affecting your operations and other farmers in California, and what you expect to happen to the crops if the situation doesn't improve?
Well, thank you, Congressman Carbajal, both for the question and for the opportunity to talk to folks today. Speaking of wildfires, there's actually a county right now just to the north of us that is already impacting basically air quality in the Bay Area. And that's one of the real issues with wildfire in the West now. It's not so much that we fear that our structures will be burned down or that kind of thing, at least right where we're located, but the air quality, which has such deleterious effects on both people and in some cases on the crops that we grow. And that's really what my comments were about with respect to smoke taint in wine. In terms of the drought, it does appear that we are headed into, or we've already, according to the National Drought Monitor, we are in severe drought at this time. And I can tell you what the decisions that we're making right now are about fallowing ground where we have insufficient groundwater to basically support the crops that we would normally grow. And so it's a real challenge going forward, and I'm not quite sure what else to say other than that.
Thank you, Mr. Talley. Continuing, wine grapes are the second largest valued crop in my district, which is why I've continuously advocated for critical disaster assistance for growers who were impacted by smoke taint. Mr. Talley, as a producer, can you talk about the impact of smoke on the quality of grapes and what it means for the price a farmer may receive?
Well, again, as I pointed out in my testimony, it's really a wide-ranging effect. And even though we had days here where we were just completely inundated by smoke, we, quite frankly, were blessed to have none of our wines actually affected by smoke taint. Again, wine growers just to the north of us in Monterey County, I know people personally who will have zero revenue from their operations associated with the 2020 vintage. They either made the decision not to harvest the crop, or in some cases harvested the crop, produced wine that they then determined was completely unsaleable. And this is becoming a problem all over the world. I mean, it started in Australia probably more than a decade ago, and there are a lot of folks that are putting a lot of effort into trying to figure out how to cure this problem. And having dealt with it once personally, I can tell you that the remediation of the problem is severe. It requires very invasive filtration of the wine. And even after we go through that process, which is also expensive, there's really no guarantee that what we're going to get is actually a saleable product. And so again, it's a challenge that we're basically trying to resolve with technology at this point.
Mr. Talley, just to continue on that point, in your testimony, you mentioned how scientists are looking to establish new protocols to treat smoke-tainted wine, and I think you touched on that briefly. Can you further explain why efforts to treat smoke-tainted wine have been unsuccessful?
Well, because again, the only solution that we have now is this filtration process, and unfortunately, it strips the wine of more of the character that we want than the deleterious effects.
Thank you very much, Mr. Talley. I'm out of time, and I will now recognize ranking member of this committee, of our larger committee, Mr. T.T. Thompson.
Well, Ms. Carvalho, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I want to say thank you to Chairwoman Bustos and Ranking Member Austin Scott, and thank you to all of the witnesses that are here to offer their unique perspectives on the farm safety net. You know, when I was selected to be the Republican leader on the Agriculture Committee, I made it clear that my #1 priority was to rebuild a robust rural economy. So that starts at the farm gate. If farmers and ranchers can be profitable in the good years, then our rural communities will thrive. Unfortunately, the good years seem to be few and far between, and our producers face risks and challenges that are unfathomable to most Americans. Farming has always been a risky enterprise, but it sure seems to be even more volatile than ever before, whether it be a natural disaster that can wipe out a crop at a moment's notice, a foreign government that interferes with a market, or a pandemic that disrupts the entire supply chain. Producers are in for a constant battle to remain viable. And that is why a strong safety net is a critical piece of rebuilding a robust rural economy. Chairman Scott has made several comments about needing to work on disaster assistance for our producers, and I agree with him. The past several years have shown us how costly and inefficient ad hoc assistance can be. Rather than wait for an act of Congress, farmers need reliable assistance that only a standing program can provide, and there is no better example of a program that responds quickly when needed than crop insurance. And above all else, we must first do no harm to the existing safety net. I have 3 guiding principles for any potential standing disaster program. Number 1, it must complement, not compete with crop insurance. Number 2, it should be easy to implement. And number 3, it should be reliable and respond quickly to disaster events. If Chairman Scott is willing to work within those 3 principles, and I really very much look forward to work with him to craft the best policy possible. No member or single party has ever had a monopoly on good ideas here in Washington, and working together to achieve a common goal will undoubtedly render a better outcome. So while we're on that subject, I was hoping that those of you that have, or witnesses that have experience with participating in the WHIP disaster program could provide your brief thoughts on the effectiveness of that program, and if continued, how it should be modified to better meet the needs of your operation. So leave that open to whatever the witnesses might like to weigh in on that first.
If I could speak to that, Ranking Member Thompson. I think my personal experience with it on my farm, and even seen with some of my insureds, you know, all the data is there on the WHIP program to be able to implement that through the crop insurance industry, maybe a little bit quicker than the folks at the Farm Service Agency. They've been inundated with a lot of programs and have done exceptionally good with that, don't get me wrong, but they have a lot of other work to be done, and I think maybe the crop insurance industry could implement that a little quicker.
Very good, thank you. Any other witnesses like to weigh in on that? Any experience with the WHIP program?
WHIP was pretty important to South Georgia, especially after Hurricane Michael, but that was the 3rd of the hurricanes in a row that we had dealt with. And like some of the other panelists had mentioned, we waited quite a while, months into years, before we got some of that WHIP money. If we can get something that's set in stone, that you have a disaster and you can get some money moving quicker, that would be wonderful. To the 3 things you mentioned, yes, 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 we'd love something like that. Hermine in 16, Harmon in 17, and Michael in 18. And after the Hurricane Michael in 18, I got to say thank you to Congressman Scott and Congressman Bishop for coming to the table and working on that together in a bipartisan way that got some money to Georgia that was definitely needed. If it hadn't been, it would have been devastating to the rural economy. Thank y'all.
Well, I know working with the ranking member for a number of years, his frustration with when relief was not timely. Sometimes we've, with the delay, the reliability and the delay of it, people are unfortunately are out of the farming practices till the help arrives. With a few seconds I have left, any comments for any input from any of the other witnesses?
Yeah, I just concur with the fellow from Minnesota, the fact that the timeliness of it could have been better. And it was a fairly complex formula, so something of easier and more of a design program would be better.
All right, very good. And Chairwoman, my time has expired. Thank you so much.
Thank you. For 5 minutes to Congresswoman Angie Craig from Minnesota.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Bustos, Ranking Member Scott, and thank you, Representative Carbajal, for doing such a great job in her stead. Thanks so much for calling this hearing to focus on the farm safety net. It really couldn't come at a better time as we transition out of the COVID pandemic response and into what we all hope will be a period of more predictability for our farmers and producers. Thank you to all of the testifiers today. It's clear based on your testimony and the conversations I've been having with folks in southeastern Minnesota that the farm safety net and specific risk management tools like crop insurance are more important than ever. Federal crop insurance has been a success story because it's actuarially sound and consistently works for farmers. Its timelines and parameters are predictable, and it enables farmers to plan risk management strategies that best suit their operations. As Mr. Tate mentioned, it's been a vital tool for him as he helps Minnesota farmers in my district navigate the intense volatility of these past few years. From beginning farmers planting their first crop to farmers like Mr. Tate, who is planting his 30th, crop insurance is a vital tool. With that focus in mind, I'd like to follow up with you, Mr. Tate, on a few points I'm hoping you can expand on. First of all, I'm hoping you can speak more about revenue protection. In your testimony, you mentioned that revenue protection policies have become the most popular crop insurance policy type and can offer protection for market price decreases. However, in years where there are low spring and fall prices for a commodity, a revenue policy would not trigger a loss based on price declines. Are there crop insurance products out there that protect against long periods of low prices? Would it be helpful if USDA looked into new insurance products to address this risk?
Thank you, Congressman Craig. Yeah, so the revenue protection policy is very common in our area. In fact, I would say probably almost, if not 100%, probably 95+% of my customers have a revenue type protection insurance product. With that being said, is there some limitations to that product in years where the spring price is low and the fall price is low? Yes, there is. And I think that's part of the reason where Congress and the Farm Bill had developed the ARC and PLC program to deal with the systemic losses that may happen over multiple years. It would be beneficial if we could develop something on the federal crop side that would deal with those issues as well, and maybe top up those payments. The one thing, I guess, and I don't mean to jump ahead or jump around on your question too much, but when we're dealing with the volatility of the markets and what's been going on here, and then also in our areas, we've also experienced a fair amount of dryness. Having the harvest price option where we get that protection when prices are higher is very important to us as well. So I hope that answers your question.
Rob, thank you so much. That answered my question, and it also took my second question for you. So maybe I'll just ask you, are there any other, given uncertainty over weather events, dry season, commodity prices, trade uncertainty, all of these things, how do you help farmers navigate the various options they have for managing risk, and how does crop insurance typically fall within that list?
Well, as we've been talking about, crop insurance provides a predictability to what the income stream is for the farmers. Having that initial base price, spring price, to set the floor or the minimum amount of coverage is great. And then when a lot of the farmers I work with will sell against that guarantee to help manage the price risk as well. And so that program has done very well to manage that risk. And the one area you're pointing out in your first question is if we get multiple years of that, can that be problematic? And yes, it can be. But right now, this year, as I talk to many of my clients, I mean, yes, we know we have some challenging production issues, but given the backdrop of crop insurance and the predictability it provides, most of my clients feel pretty good about things right now.
Well, thank you so much for your work. Thank you all for your testimony. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I now recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Ranking Member Austin Scott.
I want to ask Mr. Shannon a question, but I want to first follow up with Mr. Tate, since he is a crop insurance agent. And my question, Mr. Tate, gets to production and the average yields. Any suggestions on how we can do more to help beginning and young farmers, those who are starting out? And then in years where we have these natural disasters, like we had with Hurricane Michael, where we have widespread total losses, suggestions on how we're able to get, how we handle that yield of zero that goes in there. I know that I guess you can put the county average in there, but if you're a good farmer, your yield is historically significantly higher than the county average in many cases. Any suggestions on how we deal with production yields for beginning and young farmers, and in the cases of the disasters where we have total losses?
Yeah, actually, we do have ways of dealing with that, not just on young beginning farmers, but in all producers, where they can substitute in a T yield for that county in those years where you have a widespread loss and maybe you have to take a zero in your APH database. That helps support that coverage. In terms of helping out the young beginning farmers, we have a additional premium subsidy that's there, and I have several young farmers that I work with that have taken advantage of that, and that's been very helpful to them as well.
Well, thanks for that. I guess it's just, being insured for the average yield simply won't, in most cases, cover your cost. Mr. Shannon, you mentioned the disaster. Ranking Member Thompson took my question for the most part, but glad that you recognized my colleagues, Congressman Bishop and David Scott and I. As you know, the original estimate from USDA was $1 billion. The estimates that we had from the extension agencies in the states significantly exceeded what we were able to end up with the $3 billion. Could you speak again to the shortcomings that you noticed in the WHIP and what we developed and what we called the WHIP Plus program, and how we could improve it if we were to make it a permanent program? And do you have any thoughts? I know that particular year, especially on our dryland cotton, our yields were significantly higher than the averages, on whether or not we should allow a farmer to step up their coverage based on the crop that is actually above the ground before it's harvested.
Yes, sir. Start out with that. Timeliness was the real problem with the WHIP program. Most folks had made some other arrangements by the time they got WHIP money. Others didn't get WHIP money. Maybe had gotten some other assistance and we didn't qualify for it, or they qualified for money that got factored down and was not there to help. The state of Georgia come through with some loans that helped a lot of folks. It happened in a very short period of time. Hadn't been for that, there probably would have been a lot of other guys, farmers, men and women and families went out of the farming business, and it would have terribly affected businesses all over southwest Georgia. Anything new certainly would be something that we have the disaster and with a short period of time, the money is already moving. We saw some things last year that moved real well with the market assistance money. It didn't take long to get out. It got done. It was simple. I think something along some of those lines would work well. We seem to continue to burden our FSA offices or people working there with more and more programs that just are complicated. The simpler we can make them to get the money moving, I think is a good thing.
So for people who aren't from the Southeast, what happened in Georgia with Hurricane Michael? Our state legislature, and correct me on this if I'm wrong, Mr. Shannon, our state legislature actually went into a special session and created a loan program that actually helped some of our farmers get through until the payments from the disaster relief were made available. Is that correct?
That is correct. They went into session, and in just a few days, they had something hammered out. Within a month or so, people were qualifying for it. But now let's remember, this was and is a loan. I have one of those too that is being paid back and has to be paid back.
My time's about to expire, but the key aspect of this that I want to make sure people understand is that farmers have to pay off their notes, their operating notes, before they're able to borrow the money again for the next crop year. And so one of the reasons that I advocate, as Chairman Scott does, for some type of disaster program or better crop insurance program for our farmers is when these things like Hurricane Michael happen, we need to get the payments to the farmers significantly faster than happened in Hurricane Michael. And with that, Madam Chair, I appreciate you indulging me for the 25 seconds that I ran over.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. I now recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Lawson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and to you and the Ranking Member Scott for holding this very important hearing. And I can tell you that there's no doubt, I guess all of us know that the adverse Western climate change is threatening our industry for farmers and ranchers. Sadly, it has occurred a great deal in the 5th Congressional District that really voters, Congressman Scott, from hurricane and floods, the challenge that we've had from Hurricane Michael and Irma. I heard, and I won't try to bring it back again, about all of the situation about the WHIP program and how critical it has been to farmers, but there seem to be some recommendation that need to be made, how slow the process is, and heard about the state legislature. Sometimes we think that, government have too much interference on program and stuff, but I would hate to think, like up in Georgia, if it hadn't been for the government with their meeting, as Mr. Tate said, to iron out some problems to some of the disaster relief money could actually set in. And this question would be to everyone. The Farmer Service Agency, FSA, is essential to agriculture and community, especially in the aftermath of natural disaster. Can you all discuss the ways that you believe the FHA can improve its response to the communities that have been affected by natural disaster? And that's to the whole committee. Mr. Shannon, I think we can start off with you.
Yes, one thing probably my local office would like to have was some more help. Those ladies and gentlemen have been working overtime as much as possible to get these programs done. This quality assistance program that they were working on when they were not supposed to be working, maybe, so to speak. They were not even in the office, but they were still working. Some help from those offices would be great.
That's a good recommendation. Anyone else?
I definitely would agree. I know our office was short-staffed through a lot of this, and we've had a lot of turnover. And so anything that we can do to add more staff to help. And then I'd also encourage relationships within the other agencies in that office, US or NRCS and FSA, to work together better to implement these programs.
Anyone else want to respond? That's great.
I'll make a couple more comments on it. First off, the FSA offices in our area, I guess we're all looking forward to when they can open up and we can physically go into them again. That'll be a good day when we get the pandemic behind us. But probably more importantly, when you're talking about the WIP program, you know, I got to think that there is a way to implement that through the crop insurance program. Most of that data that's used to calculate it is there. The insurance industry could certainly help out with that and take some of the workload off of FSA.
Okay, that's great. I have Mr. Tate. I know you're involved in it. You know, it's been since 1938 when we established, Congress established the crop insurance program, and I think the WIC program came in about maybe 2017. As long as you've been involved, and I'm involved in the insurance business myself, have you seen any significant improvement in the crop insurance program, or would you recommend any other significant improvement?
I think to me, and of course, it's a little bit because of my age, but I think the biggest improvement was the revenue products that we have. And I mean, my area, it's primarily corn and soybean production. But to me, that was a big jump up in terms of participation and then also the increased subsidies. Those two things have really helped out a lot. Obviously, you know, I think if there was ways to get higher levels of coverage, I think that would be great. I mean, I think that would be very welcome from the industry as well as from the farmer's perspective. So that may be some areas that could be improved upon.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, I yield back.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Lawson. So we are at a point where our members have gone back to the House floor to vote. Ranking Member Scott's got to go vote right now. I'm going to go ahead and yield another 5 minutes back to myself and ask some questions since I am still here. I will have one more vote back on the House floor, but we'll try to manage this with members coming in and out. And if for some reason we don't have any other members come in, I will suspend until they're back, but it will be no more than probably a few minutes. But I'm going to go ahead and turn back to Mr. Kerwin, if I could, please. Mr. Kerwin, you referenced in your testimony the heavy winds and the flooding that impacted much of Illinois and much of the Midwest in 2019. That year, there was a significant number of prevented planting acres and related crop insurance indemnities. In addition to crop insurance, USDA also implemented a top-up payment to prevent plant through the WIP Plus program. Could you please talk about how implementation of that top-up payment worked from your perspective as a farmer?
Yeah, so basically we were anticipating, you know, because it's at a 55% level, I believe, this has been a couple of years now, and that, you know, when our revenue streams in the springtime weren't super high, so we started looking at having all the inputs on our crop ground, and all of a sudden the revenue streams that would be generated through the crop insurance program weren't going to be enough to cover that, let alone make any kind of money. So we lobbied pretty hard for that, you know, had conversations with you about the top-up programs or anything that we can do to generate more dollars, because at the time that we were making those decisions in June, we were up against the deadlines. Crop prices had increased because of the delayed planting, and we looked at the revenue streams that had increased, and we weren't able to participate in those because our crop wasn't in the ground. So we appreciated those top-up payments, and it's probably something as you look forward into the crop insurance, you know, how to capture, whether it's adding, allowing them that to participate in the harvest price to then kind of generate some sort of a increase in the indemnity to the producer. But the real conundrum, if you will, was when we were sitting there with all the inputs into the ground and no crop planted. We're just waiting to get in that. So I guess that's, you know, how it affected me.
All right, thank you for that important perspective. Jeff, you also talked in your testimony about the recent announcement from the USDA to provide crop insurance premium discounts to farmers that planted cover crops for this crop year, as well as about a program from the Illinois Department of Agriculture that you identified as a pilot program. Can you talk a little bit about the role of cover crops in your operation and how that pilot program has worked?
Yeah, so we started, I believe 2 years ago, and have been building on that in the state. So we offer a $5 an acre rebate on crop insurance for anyone willing and that can actually get on our website and do that from the Department of Ag. Usually those funds, we started out with $300,000, so it doesn't include a lot of acres, but those funds are usually disseminated within 2 hours at the opening of that website. But so we're really appreciative, and I think what's came out now through you folks is the $5 rebate as well on the crop insurance, which I've signed up on, and so implementation has been very easy at this point. We've certified those acres, and hopefully that carries through. But it's we use those quite extensively on our farm, both from a nutrient management and from a water quality standpoint, and have really started to work with them.
All right, thank you very much, Jeff. Mr. Allen from Georgia is back, so at this point, I recognize the gentleman from Georgia for 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, and for holding this hearing, and thank you to the witnesses for your valuable input. American farmers continue to face challenges as they fight to feed the world. Volatile commodity prices, increased market consolidation on both ends of the supply chain, unfair and dishonest trade practices by partner countries, and continued deficient access to high-speed internet are some of the most pressing issues that my constituent farmers face. Today, I look forward to discussing the experiences each of our witnesses have had over the past several years with the implementation of the 2018 Farm Bill programs and to getting an update on the effectiveness of our farm safety net. Food security is national security. Congress must continue to support our farmers and remain attentive to their needs, not only because they feed us as a nation, but because without them we will become helpless and dependent on other nations, thereby losing our sovereignty. Mr. Talley, in your comments, you spoke of California's wildfires and the impact they're having on California farmers. As I understand this, this is somewhat of a battle between the environmental sector and proper management of our forest. We've had this discussion over and over. There's got to be science to this. Obviously, I'm from the timber basket of the South and in my district, and we manage our forest. Of course, most of ours are privately owned. You have any suggestions on what we can do? In fact, Madam Chair, I would request on the record that we have a hearing with those people who, on both sides, that we can come to some kind of conclusion on how to move forward with preventing these terrible fires and the smoke and everything else that goes with it. So, Mr. Talley, could you comment on that? Yes, I'm in favor of more ongoing prescriptive burning. That's what happens, as I understand it, for thousands of years here in California, before people got so concerned about, really stopping natural fire. And consequently, we have a lot of areas that haven't burned for a long time. And that coupled with, the effects of, as I would describe it, to climate change and this drought that we're facing, we just have ongoing drying vegetation. And, again, I think that there are management practices that could be implemented, control burns in springtime that are much easier to control that would reduce the fuel load. Thank you. Mr. Tate, thank you for your testimony. Are there any specific crops or commodities that you would like to identify which you feel the crop insurance provisions of the 2018 Farm Bill are not serving adequately? Are these issues farmers that might have with it on a more regional nature?
I would have to say that would be more regional in nature. I can only speak in terms of my area, And I believe that most our area is covered fairly well with options for federal crop insurance.
Dr. Schnitke, one concern that I often hear from my constituent farmers is that an increase in market consolidation in the ag industry has led both the companies which they buy inputs from and the companies which they sell crops to have increased market power over our farmers themselves who actually produce the product. And we don't feel like they're getting an equal share. Could you speak to this concern? Is there any validity to it?
There obviously has been a great deal of consolidation within the input industry in Midwest, particularly as you look at seed companies being whittled down to basically 3 large companies. And yes, those companies, there are concerns, and there are legitimate concerns about the market power that those companies have. I would also mention that as we've seen consolidation, one of the longer term concerns may be that innovation slows down, and innovation and improved genetics are one of the things that keep the economy, agricultural economy rolling, and so there are legitimate concerns in that area.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. We still have 3 members who would like to ask questions. However, we are on our 3rd and last vote over on the House floor. So we are going to suspend for, I'm going to say 5 minutes or less, at which time I'm also going to run over and cast a vote. My apologies to our witnesses for having to stand by, but count on about a 5-minute break if we could, and so we'll recess for about 5 minutes. Thank you.
I had it off. I'd like to call us back to order, and I'd like to recognize Representative Mann.
Thank you, Mr. Carbajal.
Actually, Mr. Mann, just 1 second. Yes. I also would like to ask the witnesses to unmute your mics. Was that correct? And cameras back on. Representative Mann?
Great. Well, thank you, Representative Carbajal. And thanks to our witnesses for joining today. Thank you. I know we just had a quick recess as we ran to vote, so thanks for staying on with us as we finish this up. A handful of questions. My first question would be for Mr. Tate on crop insurance flexibility. You know, as both you're a producer, an agent, and a crop revenue consultant, so you have a unique perspective on the program and have probably seen a lot of changes during your career. One of the advantages of the crop insurance program is its flexibility to adjust to changes in agriculture and the environment through the creation of new programs and policies, as well as certain flexibilities within any given crop season. What are some of the policies, as well as what are some of the adjustments to the program that you've seen over the last 16 years that you think have been the most helpful for farmers and ranchers?
Well, I guess there's a number of things. Like I had mentioned before, the introduction of the revenue policies is a big one. I think also the trend-adjusted yield on the APH. I'd mentioned in my statement about how that's kind of a hidden deductible, if you will. Your APH lags a little bit, and so there's been changes to try to improve that. That's helped out the program considerably. But as far as what, I think you're asking what can be done to enhance this further. Again, I would have to go back to, we could look at maybe potentially getting some more higher coverage levels even. I think that would be helpful to the program.
Great. Well, thank you. And then my remaining questions would be for the three producers we have, Mr. Kerwin, Mr. Talley, and Mr. Shannon. Thank you for joining us. My parents and brother still operate our fifth-generation family farm that I grew up on in Quinter, Kansas, which is western Kansas. For our family's farm, one of the most important changes to ag policy was the 1996 Freedom to Farm Act, which changed our operation permanently for the better. As we consider updates to the 2023 Farm Bill, what are the most important parts of the farm safety net for your operation, and what potential enhancements or improvements would you like to see being made to our current programs? And that would be, maybe start with Mr. Kerwin.
So I would say that some of the best improvements would be the revisiting of the base acres and some of the program, the acreages and the yields, and seeing if there's any updating that can be done with that. From the crop insurance side, I think those increasing coverage levels and or some of the things that we have now, the ECO and SCO and some of those county-based things to top up on top of what our revenue protections are would be things that considerations and continuing. So.
Great. How about you, Mr. Talley? What improvements or enhancements would you like to see as we think about the 2023 Farm Bill?
Well, I think one of the challenges that we face in California is that the Farm Bill is really more structured for producers in the Midwest. And California is very unique. We farm a lot of niche type products, a lot of specialty products, but it does add up to the biggest value agriculture in the United States. So somehow I would like to see a little bit more attention paid to the unique challenges that specialty crop producers in California face.
Okay. And lastly, how about you, Mr. Shannon? Improvements, enhancements you think about as we look at the 2023 Farm Bill?
The seed cotton thing is important to me, and I want to thank y'all for getting that back in Title I. That and peanut program, keeping the separate payment limits on peanuts, and if we could help those reference prices some, undoubtedly our cost of production has went up the last few years, and we appreciate that can move up some.
Okay, great. I have no further questions. Mr. Carbajal, I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mann. I will now recognize Representative Bishop.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And let me give a special shout out and welcome to Mr. Shannon of Georgia. And of course, a welcome to each of our panelists. Let me just say that one of my most pressing concerns for the subcommittee is to establish a permanent solution for disaster assistance. We've done ad hoc disaster assistance on the Ag Appropriations Subcommittee for several years, and the ins and outs of the legislative process, not to mention the time it takes for implementation, really often means delays in getting assistance to the farmers. I believe that we need to have a rainy day fund or an interest-bearing account set aside so that if damage were to recur within a certain level, that we could use that fund instead of having to do a supplemental appropriations bill. My good friend, Ranking Member Austin Scott, and I have worked together to bring much needed assistance to Middle and South Georgia in the wake of Hurricane Michael, and can agree that creating a standard disaster program is not only vital, but necessary, an ongoing investment to ensure that rural America has timely relief and access to resources to sustain operations when, and not if, but when the next disaster comes. So Mr. Shannon, can you give us your perspective of how such a permanent solution for disaster assistance might impact your operation? And Dr. Schnitke, can you tell us whether or not the University of Illinois or other entities that you're aware of have conducted any analysis to evaluate the impact of a permanent disaster relief fund?
Well, my first comment would be amen. Thank you. Yes, sir. We would love to have something that would be quick to get, didn't take a lot of trouble and aggravation on anybody's part. The other part of the question, no, sir, I'm not familiar with what you're talking about there with the folks from Illinois.
I think that one of those questions was that addressed to me, and specifically, have we looked at a standing disaster program? No, we haven't looked at that particular issue here lately. We would also suggest that program, as much as possible, complement crop insurance and not take away from crop insurance, and because that has become, at least in the Midwest, a very important part of the safety net for farmers, and I think they would list that.
Not suggesting, sir, that we eliminate crop insurance. I'm trying to make available whatever crop insurance doesn't cover, that we have something in place that will be available in short term, as opposed to having to wait months and months and months to get some kind of relief through the legislative process. That was what my suggestion was. And if you guys could think about that, all of the panelists could think about it and give us some thoughts about it as we look forward to the next farm bill, we might want to consider doing that. I've got a little bit more time back, and I just wanted to ask, as we look toward the new farm bill, we have to ensure that it's flexible enough to include all of our agriculture programs and commodities, as well as a variety of specialty crops from many different geographical areas, which is why I'm glad that all of you are here today. Mr. Talley is a wine grape grower, Mr. Shannon, peanut producer, Kerwin is a grain farmer. How can Congress ensure that the next farm bill accommodates all of your unique needs and yet cover everybody at the same time?
I think from my perspective, working with farm organizations in our states and our universities to some of the challenges that you guys have identified here today is a great step forward in working with our congressional people to offer suggestions and improving what we have in place.
I would certainly agree. Improving what we already have, if we can up the reference price on the seed cotton and the peanuts, I think that would be good for our area.
I guess my suggestion was that we need to have something that is broad enough to include everyone, but flexible enough so that no particular commodity would be overlooked, mistreated, or under supported.
That's appreciated.
I think my time has expired, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. Before we adjourn today, I invite the ranking member to share any closing comments he may have. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Talley, I heard you loud and clear on the specialty crop issue. Our specialty crops are different than yours, but they're still specialty crops, and that's where I think improvements to the NAP program can come in, and hopefully we can address them in the next Farm Bill. I want to thank all of you for being here. One of the things that I do want to mention as we write the next Farm Bill is that it's important to me that any additional things that are done with regard to the environment that is currently being discussed not come out of the current safety net for our ag producers, and then it be done in the form of additional funds, not in lieu of what we are currently providing in crop insurance and other things to our producers. So thank you so much for your valuable testimony. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield to you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. I want to thank all of our witnesses here today as well. The discussion was informative. I learned from it, and want to emphasize our commitment to ensuring that the safety net and the risk management tools are working well for our farmers in time of need. With the weather and the market conditions in recent years, our witnesses have described, and the worsening drought conditions affecting much of the country, will together be actively working to understand and address the challenges that our family farmers are facing. The input that you provided us today is essential in our examination of existing programs and as we start to look ahead to the next Farm Bill. Under the rules of the committee, the record of today's hearing will remain open for 10 calendar days to receive additional material and supplementary written responses from the witnesses to any question posed by a member. This hearing of the Subcommittee on General Farm Commodities and Risk Management is adjourned.